The jungle was alive with whispers, yet it felt strangely quiet tonight. Leaves rustled under a soft wind, shadows stretched long and dark, and the air carried the scent of damp earth. The predator moved silently through the undergrowth, its eyes glowing faint gold in the darkness. It was built for hunting, muscles lean, claws sharp, teeth made for tearing flesh. Every step was calculated, every breath controlled. To the jungle, it was fear itself, and no creature dared to challenge it. But tonight felt different. The silence was not the silence of peace, but the silence before something unknown. The predator paused, ears twitching. There it was again, a faint sound, so out of place in this deadly forest. Not the cry of prey, not the growl of rival hunters, but something softer, weaker. It was a small voice, trembling and fragile. A sound that did not belong here. The predator tilted its head, nostrils flaring. It could smell fear. It could smell weakness. It crept closer, its movements smooth like flowing water. Branches bent under its weight, the jungle itself seeming to hold its breath. And then it saw a small human cub sitting against the roots of an ancient tree. The child's face was pale, streaked with dirt and tears. Its chest rose and fell with quick, shallow breaths. It was lost, fragile, and very much alone. The predator blinked, for this was no prey it had ever hunted before. Its instinct screamed easy kill. Small meal, no fight. Its stomach growled with hunger, yet something made it pause. The child's eyes looked up, wide and shining with fear. But within them was something else, something the predator did not know. A plea, a desperate call for safety. The predator stepped closer. The child whimpered, but did not run. Perhaps it could not, for the child's legs were weak. Trembling from exhaustion, the predator circled slowly, watching, studying its mind. A storm of questions it could not understand. Why was a cub here in the middle of the jungle? Alone, defenseless. Where were the humans, the ones who carried fire and iron? Why had they abandoned one of their own? A growl echoed nearby, low and dangerous. The predator froze, scanning the trees. Another beast was watching, a shadow with hungry eyes. It too had heard the child's cries. It too smelled weakness. The predator's claws flexed, tail twitching. This was no longer simple. The jungle had rules, and prey could not be left unclaimed. The child pressed itself against the tree, whimpering as glowing eyes appeared in the dark. The rival beast stepped into the clearing, its fangs glistening, saliva dripping onto the soil. It was larger, stronger, bred for killing without mercy. It growled at the predator. A challenge. The predator stood tall, its body tense. A choice had to be made: step aside and let the beast feed, or fight for the small creature that was not even its kind. The child sobbed, a tiny sound. Yet it cut through the predator's mind sharper than any claw. For reasons it did not yet understand, the predator stepped forward, blocking the cub with its own body. The rival beast snarled, circling. The jungle watched in silence. Leaves still, wind gone, time frozen. The predator let out a roar, a sound that shook the branches. The rival lunged, teeth snapping, claws tearing at the ground. The fight was brutal, fast and merciless. Blood sprayed, soil scattered, and the clearing became a battlefield. The child covered its face, trembling, too weak to scream. The predator fought with fury it had never known. Not for hunger, not for dominance, but for something else, something it could not yet name. At last the rival beast fell, body broken, breath gone. The predator stood victorious, panting, blood dripping from wounds. It turned, eyes falling on the child. The cub looked back, eyes wide with both fear and wonder. For a long moment, predator and cub stared at one another, two creatures from different worlds, bound by something the jungle could not explain. The predator lowered itself slowly, not a threat, but a shield. The child, trembling, reached out a tiny hand. It touched the predator's claw, soft skin against rough scale. And for the first time, the predator did not feel like a hunter. It felt like something else entirely. The jungle remained silent. Yet within that silence a new bond was born. The predator had made its choice. It would protect the cub, though it did not yet know why. But in the stillness of the night, it realized one truth. The story had only just begun. The jungle slept. Uneasily under the pale light of the twin moons, the predator stood over the fallen beast, its chest heaving with slow, powerful breaths. Its body was torn in places, blood dripping onto the soil, yet its eyes glowed with a strange fire behind it. The human cub sat trembling against the roots of the great tree, clutching its tiny arms around itself. The silence that followed the battle was heavy, broken only by the soft sobs of the child. The predator looked back at the cub, its golden eyes narrowing. It could end this now. One strike of claw, one snap of jaws, and the hunger inside would be silenced. That was the law of the jungle. The law it had always obeyed. Eat or be eaten, kill or be killed. Never waste strength on something weak. And yet, as it gazed upon the cub's face, streaked with dirt and tears, something inside resisted. The instinct to kill battled against a new strange pull. It did not understand it, but it felt stronger than hunger. The cub met its gaze, small eyes shimmering with fear but also with trust. The predator tilted its head, confused. Prey did not trust hunters. Prey ran, prey fought, prey screamed. But this little creature only watched, as if waiting, as if believing. The predator snarled softly, shaking its head as if trying to clear the thought away. Why did it not kill? Why did it hesitate? A growl in the distance reminded it that the jungle never rested. More eyes could be watching, more hunters drawn by the smell of blood. If it left the cub here, another beast would claim it before dawn. If it carried the cub, it would slow its movements, make it weak in the hunt. Every choice carried danger. Every path meant struggle. The predator lowered its head closer. The cub flinched but did not cry. It sniffed the tiny creature. The smell of fear mixed with warmth. Strange, so strange. The predator remembered its own kind. Remembered how they had once guarded their young in hidden nests. But those days were long gone. Now it was alone, a hunter without a pack. Perhaps that was why the child's helplessness cut into it so deeply. The cub reminded it of something. It thought it had forgotten. With a sudden movement, the predator slid its massive claw beneath the child, lifting it gently. The cub gasped but did not resist. The predator raised it into the air, studying the small trembling body, so weak, so fragile, so utterly defenseless, and yet something about this tiny thing made the predator feel different, not strong, not dominant, but responsible, as though its very survival now depended on more than its own hunger. The predator carried the cub deeper into the jungle, its steps silent but sure. The child clung to its rough scales, shivering. In the cold night, the predator could feel the warmth of the small body against its own. Strange warmth, one that felt almost like fire burning not on the outside, but inside. Every time the cub whimpered, the predator's ears twitched, listening for danger. It realized that its focus had shifted, no longer on prey, no longer on survival alone, but on protecting this fragile being. But protection came with risk. The predator knew its kind, knew the cruelty of the jungle. The rival beasts would smell weakness and follow. The humans too would come, carrying their fire sticks and thunder. They would never believe a predator saved their cub. They would only see a monster, a threat to be destroyed. The predator stopped beneath a towering cliff, placing the cub down. For a moment, its golden eyes scanned the shadows, every sound sharpening its thoughts. Why was it doing this? Why guard what was not its own? Why carry the weight of a life that did not belong to it? Its claws flexed, its teeth clenched. Hunger gnawed at its belly. It could still end it now, walk away, return to the law of the hunt. But then the cub reached out, a tiny hand brushing against the predator's leg. The touch was so light, so small, yet it struck like thunder. The predator froze, heart pounding. That touch was not fear, not resistance, it was trust. The predator growled low, almost like a sigh. The choice had been made. Though it could not explain it, It would guard this cub, no matter the cost, even if the jungle turned against it. Even if the humans came with fire and steel, it would not abandon the child. The cub yawned softly, exhaustion pulling it into restless sleep. The predator crouched beside it, curling its massive body like a wall of living armor. Its golden eyes scanned the darkness, every muscle ready to strike. The night was long, the dangers endless. But the decision was final. The predator would not let the cub die. It did not know why, but in that moment, it no longer cared. For the first time in its life, the predator felt something greater than hunger. It felt purpose, and the jungle, though filled with unseen eyes, remained silent, as if even it waited to see what would come next. The jungle was never safe after sunset. Every tree seemed alive, every shadow carried fangs, and every sound warned of death. The predator knew this truth better than any creature, for it had lived countless nights under the same pale moons. But tonight was different. Tonight it was not alone. At its side lay the human cub, small and fragile, wrapped in the roots of the ancient tree. Its tiny breaths came uneven, broken by shivers in the cold. The predator crouched low, curling its body around the child like a living wall. Its golden eyes never closed. Scanning the endless dark, hunger gnawed at its belly. The copper scent of blood from the earlier fight still thick in its nose. It could have hunted, it could have fed, but leaving the cub alone meant certain death, and so it stayed, still as stone, listening to the jungle breathe. From the treetops came the screeches of night flyers, wings slicing through the air. From the ground came the scuttling of scaled crawlers, always searching for flesh. The cub whimpered in its sleep, the sound weak but piercing. The predator lowered its massive head, a soft rumble rolling from its chest. Strangely, the sound calmed the cub. Its trembling eased, its breaths steadied. The predator blinked slowly, unsure why it cared, yet unable to stop itself. Hours passed like seasons, long and heavy. The jungle tested them again and again. Eyes glowed in the darkness, watching, waiting for weakness. A pack of lean hunters crept close, their fangs glistening in the moonlight. They circled the clearing, moving as one, ready to strike. The predator rose to its full height, claws digging into the soil. Its roar thundered through the trees, shaking the branches. The hunters froze, ears pressed flat, their courage fading. One step forward from the predator, and they scattered into the night, tails low. The cub stirred, eyes opening slightly. For a moment it looked around in fear, but when its gaze found the predator's glowing form, it relaxed. It made a soft sound, not words, not clear, but full of trust. Then it closed its eyes again, leaning against the rough scales. The predator felt a strange pull in its chest, deeper than hunger, stronger than instinct. It had fought many battles, faced countless beasts, but never had it guarded something so delicate. The night deepened, colder, darker. Mist rose from the earth, curling between the roots. The predator's ears twitched at every shift of the wind, every crack of a branch. Another threat approached, silent, patient, deadly. From the shadows slithered a serpent longer than the tallest tree, its scales shimmering with pale blue light. Its tongue flickered, tasting the air. Its eyes locked on the small sleeping cub. The predator moved without hesitation, stepping between the serpent and the child. The ground shook as the two predators faced each other. The serpent hissed, body coiling, striking with lightning speed. The predator met it with claws and teeth, the clearing exploding with chaos. Serpent wrapped around its body, squeezing with bone-breaking force. The predator roared, tearing its fangs into the serpent's neck. Blood sprayed, hot and thick, staining the roots. The cub awoke with a frightened cry, small hands covering its ears. The predator, hearing the sound, surged with renewed fury. With one final strike it ripped the serpent apart, its coils falling limp into the soil. The cub sobbed, tears shining in the moonlight. The predator turned, covered in blood but standing tall. It crouched low, lowering its head close to the child. Its chest rumbled again, softer this time, like thunder far away. The cub reached out, tiny fingers brushing against its snout. No fear now, only trust. The predator froze, its heart beating fast. That simple touch carried more weight than any battle. It was not prey, not a burden, it was something else. Something the predator could not yet name. The night dragged on. Threat after threat, testing their fragile bond. Each time the predator stood firm. Each time the cub leaned closer. The jungle seemed to understand, as if watching something new being written in its endless history. By the time the first light of dawn touched the leaves, the cub was fast asleep, head resting against the predator's chest. The predator had not moved, had not closed its eyes. Exhaustion pulled at its body, but inside it felt something unfamiliar, not weakness, not hunger, but strength. A different kind of strength, born not from killing, but from protecting. The predator lifted its head as the sky brightened. The long night had ended, but it knew the true danger had not. Humans would come, drawn by the cub's trail. And they would not see a savior, they would see a monster. The predator's golden eyes narrowed, its claws flexed. It was ready. But for the first time in its life, it did not think of its own survival. It thought only of the small, fragile life beside it. The night had changed something inside. The predator had made its choice, and it would not turn back. The first rays of dawn cut through the trees, painting the jungle in pale gold. Mist clung to the roots and branches, drifting like ghosts between the shadows. The predator stood tall, its body still tense from the battles of the long night. Beside it lay the cub, finally sleeping without fear. Breathing slow and steady, but peace never lasted long in this jungle. And this morning would prove no different. From far away, the predator heard them, heavy boots crushing leaves, the click of iron weapons, the low voices of humans. It froze, ears twitching, every muscle sharp as a blade. The sound grew louder, closer, many of them, moving in formation, hunters, warriors, not like the child. These were grown, armed, and dangerous. The cub stirred faintly, as if sensing the approach of its own kind. Through the mist, shapes appeared, armored figures with guns raised high. Their eyes swept the jungle, their voices hard, calling for the child. The predator's golden eyes narrowed, its tail twitched. It knew what was coming. The humans would not see the truth. They would not see the battles it had fought, the blood it had spilled to guard their young. They would only see a monster standing over the helpless cub. One of the humans shouted. Pointing, another raised his weapon, the black mouth of the firestick aimed straight at the predator's chest. The predator growled, low and deep, not in fear, but in warning. The cub awoke, startled by the voices, and its small cry split the morning air. The humans gasped, their focus snapping to the sound, their eyes widening as they saw their missing child. But then they saw where the child lay, against the predator's side, tiny hands clutching at its scaled skin. Their voices turned sharp, angry, desperate. Monster! One shouted, kill it. Another barked. The predator crouched lower, its body shielding the cub, its golden eyes burning. It knew a fight was near, a fight unlike any it had faced before. The humans spread out, surrounding the clearing. Their guns glowed faintly as they charged with power, ready to release death with a pull of a trigger. The predator's instinct screamed to attack first, to strike before they struck. But the cub clung tighter, crying out, small voice breaking through the chaos. The sound froze the predator in place, its muscles trembling with restraint. It had fought beasts, serpents, packs of hunters, but never had it faced the fire of men. A commander stepped forward, his face hard as stone. He raised his weapon high, but before he fired, the cub screamed, not in fear of the predator, but in fear of the humans. The child pushed forward, standing unsteadily, placing itself between the predator and the humans. The predator blinked in shock, its chest rumbling with confusion. The humans froze too, stunned by the cub's action. The commander hesitated, his finger on the trigger. The child cried louder, reaching back to touch the predator's snout. It pressed its small hand against the beast as if to say, "This one is mine." The jungle fell silent, the mist holding the moment still. The predator remained motionless, not attacking, not retreating, only watching with golden eyes that burned with fierce light. Whispers spread among the humans. "Why is the child protecting it?" One soldier muttered, "It saved the cub." Another whispered, disbelief heavy in his voice. But the commander's face was unreadable, his eyes shifting between the beast and the child. His weapon lowered slightly, though his body remained tense. He did not trust, yet he could not ignore. The truth before his eyes, the predator growled softly, not in threat, but in warning. It was ready to fight if they forced it, ready to spill blood if they dared harm the cub. But the cub's small voice cut through once more. "Stop it!" cried, the word weak but clear. The commander froze, his jaw tight, his weapon lowering further. The soldiers looked at him, waiting for his order. The jungle held its breath, every leaf, every shadow, every beast watching this fragile moment. The predator did not move, but inside its chest thunder raged. It had never bowed to any hunter, never yielded to any threat. Yet for the cub, it stood still, its claws buried in the soil, its teeth clenched behind closed jaws. The humans saw this restraint, and something in their hard stares began to shift. Perhaps not trust, not yet, but doubt. And doubt was enough to keep the firesticks quiet. The commander finally raised his hand, signaling the others to hold. No one fired, no one moved. The predator's golden eyes glowed, fierce and unbroken. The cub, trembling, leaned back against its guardian, small hands still pressed against rough scales. The humans watched, weapons lowered, but not forgotten. The standoff was not over. The danger had not passed. But in that fragile dawn, a truth began to take shape. This predator was not simply a monster. It had made a choice. And that choice was the child, asterisk. The clearing held its breath. Mist curled low across the ground, wrapping around the boots of the soldiers and the claws of the predator. The humans stood in a half circle, their weapons raised but unmoving, their eyes locked on the beast. The predator crouched low, its golden eyes blazing, its body forming an unbreakable wall between the cub and danger. Every muscle in its body trembled with restrained fury. One wrong step, one pull of a trigger, and the jungle would drown in blood. The cub stood shakily before the predator, its tiny arms spread as if to shield it. Its voice had already broken. The silence once, but now all eyes waited. The humans hesitated, confusion battling with training. No human child would defend a monster. No human cub should stand before claws and fangs without fear. And yet this one did. The commander's face was carved with doubt. His weapon remained half raised, finger hovering near the trigger. He had seen beasts, he had seen death, but never had he seen a cub cling to one. His soldiers shifted uneasily, whispers rising. "Why doesn't it attack?" One asked, "Why protect the child?" Another muttered. The commander silenced them with a sharp gesture, his eyes never leaving the predator. The predator growled, a low thunder rolling from its chest. Not a challenge, not a threat, but a warning. Its instincts screamed to strike, to leap, to rip apart the danger before it could harm the cub. But it did not move. The cub's small hand rested against its scales, and that touch alone held back the storm. One soldier stepped forward, his weapon shaking in his grip. He aimed directly at the predator's head, eyes blazing with fear and anger. The cub cried out, stumbling toward him, "No!" The voice was small, cracked, but filled with force. The soldier froze, stunned by the sound. The predator's eyes followed, claws flexing. The jungle itself seemed to tighten around them. The commander lowered his weapon slightly, his jaw clenched. "You see it?" He barked to his men. "The cub defends it." The soldiers exchanged uncertain looks, but fear held their fingers ready on the triggers. One wrong sound, one wrong breath, and they would fire. The predator's golden gaze flicked across them. Sharp and unyielding, it had fought packs, it had fought serpents, but never this. Never so many at once. Never the fire and thunder of humans. The cub pressed itself against the predator's leg, tiny arms gripping rough scales, its eyes filled with tears, but it did not step away. To the humans it was a strange sight, the small body leaning against a monster with no fear. To the predator, it was more than strange, it was unbearable. Something deep inside roared louder than hunger, louder than instinct. The cub was no longer prey, no longer burden. It was its own. The standoff stretched, seconds becoming endless. A bird shrieked above, startled by the silence. The soldiers flinched, weapons twitching. The predator snarled in response, tail lashing across the ground. The cub whimpered at the sound. And again the predator froze, forcing itself still. Every breath was war, every heartbeat a battle between instinct and choice. Finally, the commander stepped forward, his boots crunching against damp soil. He lowered his weapon fully. His men gasped, but obeyed his signal. He stared hard at the cub, then at the predator, slowly. His voice cut through the heavy silence. If it wanted the child dead, it would already be done. The words struck like fire, burning away some of the doubt. His soldiers hesitated, their weapons lowering inch by inch, but their eyes stayed sharp, their fingers ready. The predator did not move, its golden eyes locked on the commander. Its chest rumbled, not in threat, but in warning. If they tried, it would still fight. The cub, sensing the shift, stepped forward. Wiping its tears, it pointed at the predator with a trembling hand and whispered, "It saved me." The words were faint, almost lost in the mist. But the humans heard them. Their faces shifted, fear tangled with disbelief. Some shook their heads, refusing to believe. Others glanced at the commander, waiting for his judgment. The commander's eyes narrowed, the silence dragging. Finally, he lowered his weapon completely and spoke, "Hold fire." The clearing exhaled at once. The jungle seemed to sigh with it. The predator remained still, claws buried in soil, teeth hidden behind closed jaws. But inside it raged, ready for battle, ready for death if it came. Only the cub's presence, only its fragile touch, kept it from striking. The humans did not advance, but they did not retreat. They stood in uneasy balance, unsure if the beast was ally or enemy. The predator's golden eyes burned with the truth. It would never be their ally, but it would never betray the cub. That much was clear. The dawn grew brighter, painting the mist in fire and gold. The standoff had not ended, but something had shifted. The soldiers no longer saw a monster alone. They saw a monster and a child standing together, and that sight was enough to plant a seed of doubt. A seed that would grow, a seed that could change everything. Asterisk. The jungle had gone quiet. The morning sun broke through the mist, painting long golden lines across the clearing. The predator stood motionless, its body a shield of muscle and claw. The cub pressed tightly against its side. Around them, the soldiers held their line, weapons lowered but not forgotten. The commander's hand was still raised, his eyes sharp and cold. The cub's words hung in the air like fragile glass. "It saved me," the child had said. No one moved, no one breathed. As the meaning settled in, the predator's golden eyes never blinked. Its chest rumbled softly, warning and promise in every sound. The commander stepped forward slowly, boots heavy on damp soil. The predator tensed, tail twitching, claws flexing, but it did not strike. The man crouched low, keeping his weapon pointed at the ground. He looked at the child, his hardened face softening for the briefest moment. "You're alive," he muttered, voice shaking with something deeper than command. The cub nodded, small hands still gripping the predator's scales. "It kept me safe," the child whispered again, as if repeating the truth would make it stronger. The soldiers shifted, doubt flickering across their faces. They were trained to see beasts as enemies, but here was proof against their eyes. The commander's gaze rose to meet the predator's. Golden eyes met human eyes. For a long moment, two hunters studied each other. The predator did not know words, but it understood intent. This man was strong, not with claws, but with something heavier. the same strength it had seen in the cub's gaze. Finally, the commander stood tall and turned to his men. "Stand down," he ordered, his voice sharp as steel. The soldiers hesitated, then obeyed. Lowering their weapons fully, the predator growled softly. Uncertain, but it did not move. It could not yet trust, but it could see the fire of death fading from their eyes. The cub stepped forward, tiny feet pressing into wet earth. It turned back toward the predator, eyes bright with a strange light. "Come," it said softly, tugging on the predator's claw. The predator blinked, tilting its head. The cub wanted it to follow, to walk with the humans. The idea struck hard inside its chest, sharp and strange. To walk with prey, to walk with fire. It seemed impossible, yet the cub's small voice carried more weight than law or instinct. The humans parted as the cub led the predator closer. Every soldier stiffened as the great beast moved, claws sinking into the soil, golden eyes glowing like fire. Some whispered prayers, others gripped their weapons tighter, but none fired, none dared. The commander's hand kept them still, his own gaze locked on the predator. When the predator stopped, the cub looked up at the commander. "Don't hurt it," the child begged. The commander said nothing, his jaw tight, but he looked at the cub and then back at the predator. "You guard it," he finally said, voice low, "the way it guarded you." The soldiers glanced at each other, confused by his words, but the cub nodded eagerly, eyes wide with understanding. The predator tilted its head, golden eyes narrowing. "Guard it, protect it." The words carried meaning, heavy meaning. It remembered the long night, the beasts it had fought, the serpent it had killed, the blood spilled on soil. It remembered the cub's hand on its snout, the way the small voice had calmed the storm in its chest. Guarding was not hunting, guarding was not killing, guarding was something else. The commander crouched again, his voice steady but softer. "Humans guard their own," he said, "no matter the cost." The predator did not understand the words, but it felt the weight of them. It had seen it in the cub's eyes, seen it in the way the humans had marched through the jungle to find one small child. No beast would do that. No pack would risk everything for one. But humans did. That was their strength, their law, their bond. The cub looked at the predator, smiling weakly through dirt and tears. "You're like us now," it whispered. The predator blinked, chest rumbling in confusion. Like them. The idea settled deep inside, burning brighter than hunger, sharper than instinct. Perhaps it was true. Perhaps it was not. But the cub believed it, and that was enough. The soldiers still watched with sharp eyes, but the fire of fear had dulled. Some lowered their weapons fully, slinging them across their shoulders. Others stared in silence, the image of child and beast together seared into their minds. The predator stood tall, its body bleeding, its claws stained, but its eyes no longer burned, only with fury. There was something else now, something it had never carried before. The jungle remained silent, as if waiting for the moment to pass. Above, the sun rose higher, its light chasing the mist away. The predator turned, scanning the trees, every shadow. Still a threat, but for the first time, it felt less alone. The cub was safe. The humans had seen, and a strange truth had been born. The predator had learned the law of humans. Guard your own, no matter the cost. And in that moment, it understood why humans were feared, not for their fire, not for their steel, but for the bond that bound them tighter than any pack. And now, somehow, that bond included the predator too. Asterisk. The sun climbed higher into the sky, burning away the last mist of morning. The clearing no longer held the same silence, yet it felt heavy still, filled with the weight of choice. The cub sat safely among its people now, small hands gripping the arm of a soldier who carried it gently, but its eyes never left the predator, wide and bright with something stronger than fear, something closer to trust, closer to belonging. The predator stood at the edge of the clearing, its body still, marked with wounds from the long night. Its golden eyes followed the cub, unblinking. It had protected the child, fought against rivals, faced down humans, and survived. But survival was not the same as before. Something inside it had shifted. Something it could not yet name. The commander gave one last long stare at the predator, his voice low and steady. "Go," he ordered, his soldiers tense but silent. He had seen enough. More than he had believed possible. This beast had guarded his people's young. And though he could not call it friend, he would not call it enemy either. The predator growled softly, not in anger, not in threat, but in something close to acceptance. Its gaze lingered on the cub one final time. The child raised a hand, small. Fingers waving in the sunlight, the predator blinked slowly. Chest rumbling deep, and then turned away. Back into the jungle it went, each step heavy but certain. Leaves brushed its scales. Shadows wrapped around its body. The jungle welcomed it home, yet something had changed. It was not the same creature that had walked into the night before. It was no longer only predator, no longer only hunter. It carried something else now, as it moved deeper into the wild. Memories flickered across its mind. The child's trembling voice, the tiny hand pressed against its claw, the long night of battles, the serpent's coils crushing, the cub's cry breaking through the chaos, and finally the words of the commander. Heavy and sharp. Humans guard their own. The predator's chest rumbled at the thought. Guard their own. Yes, it had seen it. It had felt it. Not just words, not just instinct, but choice. Stronger than hunger, stronger than fear. The jungle tested it again, as always. A pack of smaller beasts circled in the shadows, eyes glowing with hunger. Before, the predator would have roared, struck, killed without hesitation. Now it only stared, its golden eyes fierce, its chest steady. The beast sensed the difference and slunk back into the dark. The predator did not chase. It did not need to. For the first time, it understood there was strength in restraint. It reached its lair as the sky turned crimson with dusk. The air smelled of earth and blood, but the ground where the cub had rested was still warm in memory. The predator lay down, body aching, wounds burning, yet its mind refused to rest. It stared at the dark canopy above, the stars beginning to appear, and it thought of the cub again, how something so weak, so fragile, had changed everything. The predator flexed its claws, staring at them. These were tools of death, yet the cub had touched them without fear. It touched the scars across its chest where the serpent had wrapped. Pain still burned there, but alongside pain came pride. Not pride in survival, but pride in protection. It had guarded, not hunted, and in doing so it had found something greater than itself. The jungle whispered with the sounds of night. Wings beat overhead, crawlers scraped along roots. Distant roars echoed, but the predator felt no hunger, no urge to kill. Instead, it felt a strange fire inside. Not the fire of rage, not the fire of hunger, but the fire of purpose. It closed its eyes, but sleep did not come. Visions played behind its eyelids. The cub's smile, the humans lowering their weapons, the commander's words. It understood now why humans were feared. Not because of their fire sticks, not because of their iron, but because they fought for each other. Because even the smallest among them was never truly alone. Because they guarded their own, no matter the cost. A deep rumble rolled from its chest, neither growl nor roar, but something softer. The jungle did not answer, but it listened. The predator opened its golden eyes once more. It was not human, and it never would be, but it had learned from them. It had changed because of them. And change was more powerful than claw or fang. It rose again beneath the starlight, body aching, but strong. The jungle stretched endless before it, filled with danger, filled with blood. But the predator did not feel like the same creature it once was. It carried the memory of a cub, the touch of trust, the lesson of loyalty. And it whispered to itself, voice rough but clear in the silence. Now I know why humans are dangerous. Its golden eyes blazed. Sharper than fire, stronger than steel. They fight for each other. The predator stepped forward, deeper, into the shadows of the jungle, and with every step, the world felt different. For the predator was no longer only hunter. It was something more. It was awakening, asterisk.